Every year I've done the survey, they're seeing that in an average between 20 to 30% of the corpses, these white fibrous clots, as well as this other phenomenon called microclotting, as well, which the embalmers describe as what they call coffee grounds or dirty blood and the drainage coming off the corpse. And that can be just as dangerous, because the microclotting occurs at the capillary level. Your very small blood vessels can block the exchange of oxygen at the lungs, then they carry that oxygen to all the major organs of your body, including your brain, your eyes. That's why a lot of people might be suffering from brain fog right now or vision problems. They may have microclotting going on inside their head. Like I said, the embalmers are seeing these things in 20-25% of their corpses. It makes you think, well, what percentage of the living are walking around right now with these things forming inside them?
Tom, how many people want to start a podcast off with you by saying ground control to Major Tom? How many people?
Quite a few, but that's okay. Do it.
Okay, because that's really all I want to say.
Bowie tribute.
We need a little levity when we're talking about embalmers and all the things that you're bringing over here to the Ultra Free podcast with Dr. B and Dr. Dre. I'm sorry, you don't want me to call you Dr. B. You want? Go ahead. What do you want?
You can call me whatever you like.
Okay.
Whatever you feel comfortable with.
Well, I'm calling him Major Tom.
Major Tom.
Okay. And now we'll be serious and listen to the atrocities of the planet. Can you tell us why you retired first? I mean, you were retiring anyhow, or did you retire over mandates?
Yeah, I retired over mandates, Drea. In fact, we have a presentation I can go through, and I can tell you the whole story if you want me to go through the presentation. But my name's Tom Haviland. I'm a retired U.S. Air Force major. Spent 20 years in the U.S. Air Force, retiring at the rank of major, then spent an additional 16 years as a defense contractor, serving, with the Air Force at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio. But it all came to an abrupt halt in October of 2021 when I refused to take the COVID-19 vaccine. And then what that did, Drea, is it actually turned out to be a blessing in disguise because it gave me the time in early retirement to do these worldwide Embalmer Blood Clot Surveys that I started doing after I watched that movie Died Suddenly. It came out in the fall of 2022. So that's what I like to talk about today, and not just about the finding of the white fibrous clots and how prevalent they are in both the dead and the living, because I've been in touch with a doctor that's seeing them in the living as well. But then also about the reluctance, I actually call it cowardice by a lot of embalmers, funeral directors, and doctors around the country not to want to talk about this very unusual side effect from the COVID vaccines that's been happening since 2021. So.
Did you talk? Was it Richard Hirschman? Was that you who spoke to that particular embalmer?
Yeah.
Do you know that guy?
Yeah, an embalmer.
Was it?
Yeah, Richard's actually turned into a good friend now. I'm in touch with almost all the embalmers from that movie Died Suddenly. There were about 6 or 7 of them in that movie.
John Looney as well.
Richard Hirschman and I communicate about once or twice a week. John O'Looney, he's a funeral director in the UK. Yeah. And his embalmer and he have been finding white fibrous clots in about 40 to 50% of their corpses over the last 4 years as well. Similar to Richard Hirschman, who's a trade embalmer. Yeah. So it's a serious issue.
Yeah, it's something.
If you want me to, I can just start my presentation and we can just go through it because I'll talk about all these things in the presentation.
Let's go. So, show it to us. Okay. We don't need to hear us talking.
Share screen here if I can. Well, what I want to do is I want to get your feedback along the way as we go through the slides because I want to know what happened to you during the whole situation as well.
We're just here to learn like the rest of the Ultra.
All right, so you can see that screen?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So this is actually a presentation I gave when I was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. G. Edward Griffin, the gentleman that wrote the Creature from Jekyll Island about the history of the Fed, our monetary system.
Yeah.
And he also has been warning about things like communism over the last 40 or so years, about the takeover of the institutions, those kind of things. He had what was called a Red Pill Expo back in July of this year, and he invited me to come there and speak. And the title of my briefing was Why Doctors and Embalmers Fear to Speak Out About Deadly Vaccines and Killer Blood Clots. Ed actually suggested a different title. So he actually suggested I call it Courage is Contagious. It's time to draw your line in the sand. And I agreed with him, because basically that time was a time of a lot of tyranny, and a lot of people did not display courage. They cowered to the tyranny of the vaccine mandates and the wearing of the mask, etc. And when we do that, we let the tyrants win, don't we? We let them control us. We don't stand up for ourselves, and we lose a little bit of self-respect and dignity in the process. So the presentation you're going to see today, Drea and Doctor, you're going to see some heroes, but you're also going to see some cowards and some people that were actually helped the tyranny go along. Yeah. We all remember 2020, right? That was the year that COVID came out, and we all had to start wearing masks. It got really silly. I was actually ashamed of myself. I played the game. I would wear the mask into the restaurant and then get to the table, sit down, then you take your mask off to eat. It was silly, right? The 6 feet of distance, social distancing. It was just kind of crazy, wasn't it? It was like they were trying to isolate us, trying to make us afraid of each other. People were canceling Christmases and Thanksgivings on each other. It was all for a virus, by the way, that had a 99.7% survival rate and a average age of death of around 80 years old. We went through a lot of things, didn't we? Just for that, it was crazy, right?
Insanity.
But then things got crazier in 2021. They came out with the COVID-19 vaccines, right? And at first they were nice about it, right? They asked you, they said, could you please get the COVID-19 vaccine? If you want to protect yourself, you certainly don't want to kill grandma, But then when they didn't get the desired result they wanted, then they upped the ante a little bit, didn't they? They started offering like cash, small amounts of cash, or free cheeseburgers or French fries if you got the jab. But then finally, they really showed their teeth. They bared their teeth, didn't they? They mandated the jabs. They said, if you don't take this shot, we're going to fire you from your job. We're going to kick you out of college. We're not going to let you fly on an airplane or go to a baseball game or, go to a concert. They basically were going to try to make us a non-citizen if you didn't take the jabs. Drea and Doctor, what were your experiences during that time, during 2020 and 2021? I'm curious.
This is my anchor. He was my anchor during that time. Do I do it? What do I do? Oh my God, what the hell? I knew I couldn't do it.
In retrospect, the fear card was played, obviously. They even hired Yale University's psychology department to figure out how to do the PSYOP. And that's why you saw all this stuff like, we got to save Granny. It's a patriotic thing to do. We're doing it for other people. It's all part of the PSYOP. I saw through it right in the beginning because I remember them trying this nonsense with bird flu. If anybody has a long enough memory, they'll remember that they couldn't get those ones off the ground as much, but they were doing a lot of the same nonsense. And so that same card was being played, but they had perfected the virus this time and got it to spread where they needed to spread. So I did not go along with any of it and refused to mask. And in my practice, that
good
was
for you.
very common. Yeah,
well done.
I stood up right in the beginning and educated my patients as to what was really going on because I could see what was coming. I know they had never been able to make a coronavirus vaccine ever successfully. And even in the studies they did, it ended up injuring or killing the animals once they were exposed to the wild virus. So people didn't know any of this. So my job was to try to educate them as they went along. And Dre.
I was one of them.
Yeah.
What do I do? What do I do? We were washing groceries outside of the house, masking. I was also taking care of someone who was immunosuppressed with a heart transplant. But I knew in my heart of hearts I would never vaccinate her.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know enough about it. Also, it's so weird. But when I caught wind of all the 5G towers going up while everyone was in lockdown. That for me was, I don't know why there was a correlation because we didn't know anything yet. There was some underground information. I was never a conspiracy theorist to that degree, but you can always look at that song that Shooter wrote years ago, and we made a music video, my ex, a music video about mass vaccinations, and that was 2010. It never got away from me, and it just was like, I feel like this is it. This is the moment. This song is the fucking moment that he was talking about. And this is a really crazy story, but there was an old hippie that used to come onto his bus all the time, and he had a riddle of all these rock stars. And he said, you're a part of the riddle, Shooter. You are a part of the riddle. You have something to say about what's coming in the future. We had no idea what he was talking about.
Yeah.
I know this is so bizarre and because we're talking about real hard facts right now, but that was a weird moment. And I was like, I'm going to sit this one out and wait. And I drove this man absolutely crazy, as I do to this day. So I just wouldn't do it. But then when the mandates set in and I couldn't work anymore, I knew that was it. I knew the mandate was moving us towards, I mean, you're talking about communism or, just some sort of complete, totalitarian world. And it's anything under threat is definitely something to wait on. So that's where I was at.
And you're right, Tom. They rolled it out.
Well, God bless the two of you.
Yeah. They rolled it out like tiptoe to totalitarianism. So at first it's optional, and then pretty soon the screws start to tighten, and that they know how to manipulate society psychologically. So fear is all you have to do. It only takes 2 weeks of lighting up somebody's brain in fear to light the limbic brain up, and then from that point on, they do everything out of a fear-based neurophysiology. So they'll do what they tell them to do.
But French fries?
Yeah,
And Disney tickets and donuts,
lap dances.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all pretty silly in retrospect, and people now can see through it, but at the time they couldn't.
Even a lot of the people that went along, they care not to. I always had a theory about it too. Yes, people were afraid, but I felt like it. I really felt like it was a test.
A really quick break to say we're glad you found the Ultra Free podcast and hope you're enjoying this episode. A great way to support the podcast is to head over to the Ultra Free website to buy merch. Link in the show notes below. We have cool hats and hand-screen t-shirts, and we'd love to see you in them. So buy a few. Take photos and tag us on your socials to spread the Ultra Free vibes. Like and subscribe and leave comments when you have them. And remember, we don't need to be right. We just need to be free. Ultra Free. Now back to the episode.
They were tests. I know it was a test, and I know it was an actual test, but spiritually, like without them even paying attention, the powers that be, I felt like everybody that complied with it the fear, like the people that chose fear over common sense. And I don't want to say God for people who don't actually want to believe in God. But for me, I was like, I'm going with God on this one. He created this wild body that is this amazing computer system. Oh my God, my dogs are going crazy. Hold on. Leti, tú puedes coger los perros.
I love your bravery. You two are rare. You two are rare because most people did wind up taking the jabs.
Yes.
I was at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio. This is a picture of me and my lovely wife, Joy. Joy, by the way, is from Kenya, Africa. And Kenya, by the way, had very little uptake of the jab back in 2021 and 2022. In fact, only about 10 or 15% of the country took it. Guess what, folks?
Wow.
They've had no problems with excess mortality the last 4 or 5 years, like highly vaccinated countries like the U.S., Canada, Australia, and most of Europe. But I had long since hung up my uniform, and I was on my 16th year as a defense contractor, so 36 years in with the U.S. Air Force, and I loved my job. I had a great job. I was working in an F-16 shop, and we were upgrading jets for the countries of Singapore and South Korea. And I actually got a chance to travel to those countries every once in a while, as well as to Lockheed Martin's Fort Worth plant, where they were modifying 4 of the jets for flight testing, putting the new electronics on board, and then making sure that they worked properly and that the airplanes didn't fall out of the sky. and I love my job. But as I said earlier, it all came to an abrupt halt in October 2021, thanks to this gentleman right here. This is Lieutenant General Carl E. Schaefer. You may not be able to see on his shoulders there, Dre, but he's got 3 stars on each of those shoulders. He's a 3-star general. And he sent out an email in early October of 2021 with the dates that the military had to get their shots by, the government civilians, and us defense contractors, which I was one working at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio at the time, the dates you had to get the shot by or else get kicked out. And he also, in that email, tried to guilt those of us, like you were talking about earlier, those nudge units, those PSYOP measures, to get those of us who hadn't taken the jab to take it. So I sent him back an email. Now remember, this is an Air Force 3-star general. And I said, shame on you. You failed us. Instead of standing up for our right to decide for ourselves whether or not to take an experimental drug, you chose to spend your time trying to guilt us into taking the jab. Shame on you. And I didn't just send the email to him. I CC'd all 30,000 people that work at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio.
Wow.
So
Good for
I
you.
knew what was going to happen. I got a call about a half hour later from my defense contractor boss, and I was fired from a $167,000 job by shaming the Air Force 3-star in front of the entire base. But, somebody had to do it. None of the generals, none of the colonels, none of the high-ranking military folks were pushing back on these unlawful mandates. So it was terrible. They were going right along with the tyranny.
Wow. I cannot believe
Along with that
I didn't know that.
email, I sent a 4-page document along with that email because I wanted them to know that I didn't make my decision emotionally, that I actually based it on logic. And for 2 reasons. First of all, the data did not support what they were trying to do. Our own CDC wasn't putting out very good information at all, but their counterpart in the UK was, called Public Health England or UK Health Security Agency. They were putting out this document called SARS-CoV-2 Variants of Concern Technical Briefing, and they were putting out these technical briefings every couple of weeks. And in technical briefing 23 that was dated 17 September of 2021, there was a table 5 in that document on pages 19 and 20 that showed hundreds of thousands of breakthrough cases of COVID amongst the fully vaccinated by the early fall of 2021. At the very same time, Fauci and Birx were telling us here, this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated, right? They were lying to us here, and they knew they were lying to us. So it was terrible. And then I also knew about the existence of the Nuremberg Code, right? That, the civilized countries of the world decided at the end of World War II to try the Nazi doctors and said from now on, when the experiments are done on humans, that needs to be voluntary, not mandatory, right? And those people that are volunteering for that experiment should have what's called informed consent. They should understand, for example, how long the duration of the experiment is going to be. Not that we're going to give you a couple of doses of Pfizer or Moderna, and then, oops, we're going to have to give you boosters later on. We didn't realize it, but now we're going to have to give you boosters, right? Also things like side effects, short-term and long-term side effects. They didn't know what was going on, or maybe they did and didn't tell us. But, you should know before you go into the experiment what your chances are of getting cancer. So it was very unethical what they did to us. So what do you do when you're fired from your job and you go into early retirement? Well, obviously you take to the streets. That's what I did, Dre. That's me in the middle holding that no vax mandate sign. And I'm with some friends there. We went to that Defeat the Mandates thing. Yeah, that was we were at the Washington Monument. We were on the way to the Lincoln Memorials where it was held. And there was a couple thousand people there, not nearly as many as I would have liked to have seen, though.
No.
But that's where, Dr. Robert Malone, Peter McCullough, Pierre Corey, Steve Kirsch, RFK Jr. gave the keynote at the end talking about, we should not be mandating these vaccines. So what I did, though, is I took that same sign you see, and I actually held that sign for over a year, from the fall of 2021 all the way through the fall of 2022. For about 120 days, I stood at a busy street corner not too far from the Air Force Base because I wanted to show support for the men and women at the base. And I also wanted maybe to convince a few moms or dads not to jab up their kids. But, what was funny was my wife got a few calls from her girlfriends saying, hey, I saw Tom down there at the corner is everything okay with Tom? Because it was unusual, right? It was kind of embarrassing for me when I started to do this. When the first time I went down there, I said, what are you doing here? But like I said, it was important to get out there and show that somebody is standing up against these mandates. And what was interesting is over that year that I did that for those 120 days, I probably stood at that corner for about 600 hours, probably saw about 500,000 cars go by. And out of every 100 cars, I'd say only about 60% of the people did nothing. I kind of call them the mushy middle. And a lot of those people actually wound up taking the COVID vaccines. There was good news. There was a 20% of the population that went by that honked their horns, gave me a thumbs up, said, right on, man, you should make your own choice whether to get the jabs or not. But Dre, there was 20% who hated me. They gave me the middle finger. They said, F you. They said, you're killing grandma, take the jab. There was even a few cars that pretended to swerve over and try to hit me because I was standing very down close to the curb. But what was really interesting is throughout that year, as we learned more and more negative things about the vaccine, like the fact that it, couldn't stop you from catching COVID or transmitting it to others. Also these, side effects like myocarditis, these clots that we're talking about, or we'll be talking about soon, and turbo cancers, nerve damage, miscarriages, all this. That 20% never changed their mind at all. They just hated me, even at the end of that time. I think they were under a mass formation psychosis. I really do. And they became like the little tyrants, the little generals that made us all comply, right? Those type of people, right? The ones that told you in the store, put your mask back on, it's below your nose, that kind of stuff. Yep. So,
yeah.
Well, I had no idea that you did all of this stuff. I mean, I know, well, we have such a delay on this again. But I had no idea that you had done all of this. I thought you were gathering data. I had no idea how balls to the wall you went from the very beginning. So I'm loving this presentation. Is this the first time you're showing this
my
presentation?
origin story. Yeah.
I love it. Okay, continue. Go.
No, like I said, I showed it in Tulsa.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I think you're the third time, Drea.
Okay.
Nice.
So, we saw what was happening in 2021, right? You turn on your TV and you see soccer players dying on the pitch, right? Keeling over with heart attacks. These are super athletes, right? The best athletes in the world. We also saw TV anchors, falling out of their chairs on live TV. It was nuts, wasn't it? It was just crazy what was going on, through 2021 and 2022.
But
so
no
then
one
I
cared
watched,
while it was
things
happening.
kind of really changed for me, Dre, when I watched. Say that again?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, the delay. But no, I noticed that no one really gave a shit while that was happening. But then again, it wasn't in a lot of people's news feed. You had to be, locked into a different type of news feed to see the truth on that. So it never made mainstream news. But who cares? I mean, the social media, the phone is enough information for people to digest these days, and nobody gave a shit, which was unbelievable.
Yeah. We did get a couple of national clues. You remember the Damar Hamlin, the defensive player for the Buffalo Bills? Yeah. He fell over in a Monday Night Football game against the Cincinnati Bengals, had basically a heart attack. They had to revive him right there in the field. They said it was due to commotio cordis, that he got hit so hard that it stopped his heart. Yeah. But that wasn't true. We know it wasn't true because after he got hit, he got back up, adjusted his helmet, then fell down 2 seconds later. So it couldn't have been commotio cordis. It was a vaccine-induced heart attack.
Yep.
So in any event, I watched that movie Died Suddenly. It came out the week of Thanksgiving in the fall of 2022. And that movie, it can still be found on Rumble. It's about an hour-long documentary. And what's interesting is in that movie, about 6 or 7 embalmers are featured in there that said they were seeing these very unusual white fibrous clots in their corpses. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yes, it's absolutely.
It's very hideous looking. Here's another one.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Here's another one. These photos, by the way, are provided by embalmer Richard Hirschman. Richard was the star of the movie Died Suddenly. He's what's called a trade embalmer. Richard embalms about over 300 corpses per year. He actually contracts with about 12 different funeral homes. So he does a lot of bodies. And he's, like I said, seeing these in about 40% of his corpses right now. But I watched that movie Die Suddenly. And in the movie, they showed them pulling these kind of clots out of corpses. And what really got me going, Dre, was they were at the 13-minute and 15-second mark, an amazing statement was made. An embalmer from the state of Indiana, a Mr. Wallace Hooker, he was lecturing at an Ohio Embalmers Association conference in Columbus, Ohio, on the 26th of October in 2022. And he was lecturing to a room full of 100 embalmers, and he showed them photographs of, like the ones you just saw, of the white fibrous clots that he'd been moving from his corpses for about the last year and a half of that time. And he said, by a show of hands, how many of you are seeing these same white fibrous clots? And he said almost all 100 embalmers in the room raised their hands, yes.
Yeah.
He then asked him, well, when did you start seeing these things? And they all agreed it was in the middle of 2021, about 6 months after the COVID vaccines rolled out. He says all that in the movie. So, that was an amazing statement, right? Either those embalmers raised their hands or they didn't. So I got up the next morning, Tuesday of the week of Thanksgiving of 2022, and the night after the movie premiered. And I said to myself, I don't think any reporter is going to chase after this story. So I called the Ohio Embalmers Association. They're located in Cincinnati. And I talked to their president, Mr. Dan Becker, their vice president, Mr. Woody Wilson, and their secretary, Mr. David Hicks. I asked all three gentlemen, hey, did you happen to be in the room at the time those 100 embalmers supposedly raised their hands, saying they're seeing these clots? Well, none of the three of them happened to be in the room at the time. However, the vice president, Mr. Woody Wilson, who runs his own funeral home up in Marysville, Ohio, about an hour north of where I live in Dayton, and he does his own embalming. A lot of funeral directors do their own embalming. Woody said to me, Tom, I'm seeing the white fibrous clots too. So that was my wow moment, Dre. I said, now I have an official officer. And by the way, Woody is now the president of the Ohio Embalmers Association, very well-respected man, saying that he's seen these white fibrous clots just like these embalmers in the Died Suddenly movie. So right then and there, I decided I needed to do a nationwide survey, which I then later on turned into a worldwide survey by including Canada, the UK, and Australia and New Zealand to see just how prevalent these white fibrous clots were, because I had a sneaking suspicion that our own FDA and CDC would not be looking into this problem. And boy, was I right. Any comments there?
Well, because it's disinformation and misinformation, Tom. That's why. No, that's what they tell people. So that is exactly why it gets shut down.
I know they do.
Yeah. So that mainstream media is obviously brought to you by Pfizer. So you're not going to get any real journalism looking into this. It had to be people in the movement, people on the other side.
Goofy actors from Hollywood,
actors
like this one.
Right? Crazy docs like me. But you weren't going to see anything. This was coordinated and planned for many years. Yeah. Clearly now you can see it. These clots are
because they had plenty of chances to reverse course.
They did.
They are, aren't they?
Yeah.
So what I did is I worked with a friend of mine from Northeastern Ohio, Miss Laura Kasner, who runs our Substack that we affectionnally call Clot-Tastrophe. I don't know if you've ever visited or not, Dre, but we have a lot of articles on there. It's a free Substack. You can subscribe. You can find it at Laura, Laura, Kasner, Kasner.substack.com. Like I said, it's a free Substack. We got lots of articles on there about the results of my 3 worldwide surveys. What we did is we sent out using SurveyMonkey. It was only a short, 3 to 4 minute survey, about 10 questions. And we sent the link to that to over 50 national, regional, and state funeral director associations around the world, each with hundreds of members underneath them. So we asked them, hey, please forward this out to all the active embalmers in your association. And then we also sent the email with a link to the survey to over 1,700 funeral homes around the world directly. Wow. So I had to look up the emails for 1,700 funeral homes. So it was quite a task. But we should have gotten probably about 5,000 responses to each of our surveys. This last one we did in 2024, we only got 301 responses, but it's still enough to see a signal. Houston, we do have a problem, because if you see there, we asked them in the 2024 survey, of the 301 that took it, 250 of the embalmers, 83%, said they were seeing the white fibrous clots, in the year 2024. So shocking stuff, right?
Yeah. Terrible.
So then, of course, the next natural question is, okay, well, what percentage of your corpses in the year 2024 have these white fibrous clots in them? And if you average all the bars there on the left together, including the 43 embalmers that said they saw no clots, you still get an average of 27% of the corpses having the white fibrous clots in them. So these things are not rare, doctor. These things are prevalent.
Yeah.
The embalmers are still seeing them in about 1/4 of their corpses. So it's amazing they've been able to keep a lid on it all these years.
Mind-blowing.
So one of the questions we did ask in this last survey was, has your professional embalmer or funeral director association ever discussed the whitish fibrous clots? And what's interesting, out of the 301 embalmers that responded, only 52 of them, less than 20%, said that their funeral director associations are talking about them, even though 83% of the embalmers said they're seeing the clots. Less than 20% of the associations are talking about it at their annual conventions or in their quarterly newsletters. Now, I did get a break here. In June of this year, a few months ago, I was actually invited by Mr. Taylor Moore, who was the president of the Tennessee Funeral Directors Association at that time. And he said, Tom, I want you to come talk to our funeral directors and embalmers, because they're scared. We're getting into year 5 of this now. They're still seeing these clots. I want you to come talk to them about it. So I did. I gave an hour presentation there. I actually took a survey there at that meeting. And of the Tennessee embalmers, 18 of the 28 embalmers in that room, that was 64%, almost 2/3, said they were still seeing the clots in the first half of 2025. And they were seeing them in an average of about 17% of their corpses. So still a very serious issue. So, why is that? Why don't funeral directors and embalmers want to talk about this unusual thing that's happening, right? These white fibrous clots, I don't know if you can see on the screen here. Can you see the vial I'm holding up? That's what one of the white fibrous clots looks like. Okay, you'll have to wait till we get rid of the presentation. I'll show you when we take the presentation down. I've got live samples here. But one of the things first of all, we know that the funeral director business is a kind of a private business, right? You don't talk about the dead. But I suspect there's something else going on here, Dre. If you were a funeral director and you had mandated everybody in your funeral home take the COVID-19 vaccine, all your employees, including your embalmer, would you want to participate in a survey that might show a link between the COVID vaccines and these white fibrous clots? You might be setting yourself up for a lawsuit, right? If one of your employees gets injured. We also know from our own CDC that about 80% of American adults over the age of 18 took at least the first 2 COVID jabs. So there might be some cognitive dissonance on their part. They may not want to know the answers to these questions, right? Because they've taken the jabs themselves. And also, we know that the funeral business has been good these last few years. I said earlier that we've had 10% excess mortality for the last 4 or 5 years in highly jabbed countries. So
Yep.
yeah, they're getting plenty of bodies.
Yes.
And, they got paid for it too, right? They got paid like $7,500 if the death was listed as COVID.
There you go.
So the families were incentivized, and so were the funeral homes, because they knew they were going to get paid.
So even in the funeral,
One of the organizations we've sent our survey.
Hospital. I thought the hospitals were getting a pay.
The hospitals did get paid off through the CARES Act, but you're saying the funeral homes as well?
Yes. Families, if they could get on the death certificate that their loved one died of COVID, then they were given $7,500 to go forward towards a funeral expense. But you're absolutely right, Ray. The hospitals were paid massive amounts of money.
Yeah.
I did not know this piece.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody got paid.
$7,500 towards
churches got paid to close up. That's why a lot of churches closed.
Yeah.
Everybody was getting money from the government to shut down, lock down, say everything was due to COVID. So that's why those numbers got really pumped up. Although that's why we're very suspicious about the COVID deaths in numbers.
Exactly.
Okay.
You were saying, Doctor?
Oh,
Yeah. Say they keep the liquor stores open though, and the big box
Yeah.
stores. No problem there. Unbelievable.
I know. It's terrible, wasn't it? Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, one of the organizations that we've tried for 3 years to get to take the survey, but they never have, is the British Institute of Embalmers. And it's kind of ironic because if you go on their website, they have a code of ethics. And their key point number 4 in their code of ethics says that whenever they see anything unusual in the world of embalming, they're supposed to investigate and do research in that area. Well, these white fibrous clots are about as unusual as it gets, right? So I think they're violating their very own code of ethics. And it's a shame, isn't it? Because they could provide us with interesting information. Another curious case was a case of the state of Pennsylvania. They were my star performer in my 2023 survey I did. In that survey, I sent out my usual email to the associations around the country. And the gal that answered for Pennsylvania was a Miss Allison Henkel, was her secretary. I said, Allison, could you please make sure you distribute this survey to all your active embalmers throughout the state of Pennsylvania so they can take the survey? And she did just that, because I checked my SurveyMonkey collectors the next 2 days. And over those next 2 days, I got 125 responses from embalmers in that one state alone, Dre. So, and about 70% of them said they were seeing the clots. About 30% said they were not. But what's really bizarre is Pennsylvania this last year in 2024, they declined to take my survey. Why? Why would they take the 2023 survey and then turn around a year later and decline taking the 2024 survey? And this is in spite of the fact that their own president, Mr. Chris Calvi Jr., sent me an email in November of 2024 saying, Tom, I'm having trouble getting fluid, the formaldehyde, from the elbows down into the hands of almost all my corpses. So despite the fact their own president was having trouble with his own corpses, they refused to send the survey out to active embalmers throughout their state. Do you see what's going on here, Dre and Doctor?
Yeah.
They're hiding the truth, aren't they?
Absolutely.
They're not one to talk about it. It's, one of the interesting things is embalmers, we allow them to comment in the comments box at the end of all of our surveys. And we try to make this as unbiased as possible, by the way. In all of our embalmer surveys, we never mentioned the words COVID or COVID vaccine. We didn't want to lead the witness. We just asked them questions like, what are you seeing? When did you see it? What percentage of your corpses have these clots? So we wanted to keep it as unbiased as possible. But despite that fact, when the embalmers did their comments, a lot of them talked about the vaccines in their comments. Some of them defending the vaccines, others implicating the vaccines as the cause of the clots. So let me read a few of them to you. Here's one from Kentucky. He says, I've been an embalmer since the early 2000s for an embalming service. I've never seen anything like this before the spring of 2021. I have experienced the white fibrous clots that have stretched out to 20 inches. It's like battling a rubber band. My right hand and elbow has suffered from these clots. I've been saying for the last 3 years, this isn't normal. I've recently spoken with a physician that's been hearing this in his field. We are in the same agreement in that we feel we know where this has come from. I think he's talking about the vaccine there, don't you? Here's another one from Idaho. Let's see. Sometimes I'm given the information about if someone has had a certain vaccine. Sometimes I'm aware they've had 5 or 6 doses of it. These are the people we are seeing with the abnormal clots or significant amount of clots. Here's another one from Virginia. I'm finding a lot of the white rubbery clots and had been taking pictures of them, but it's become the new normal. I don't use a drain tube anymore because of all the clots, blood clots and the fibrous white ones. My angular forceps is my go-to instrument to help remove them. Get a load of this one, Dre. This is from a embalmer in Canada who has the opposite opinion. He says, since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, which I assume this survey is pertaining to, I have not noticed any new clots, fibrous structures, or contents in the blood outside the ordinary. It's also not our responsibility as embalmers to take note of these cases, record or share any information, as it is confidential medical information that breaches the privacy clause we have with our client families. Videos and articles such as "died suddenly" are anti-vaccine, COVID-denying propaganda that is based in no actual fact other than to spread right-wing beliefs and fear-mongering the public. What do you two think of that comment?
Wow.
I mean, this normally would have been the stuff that liberals care about. This type of medical interference is more of a used to be a liberal ideology that we care about our health.
That's all been turned.
Yeah,
That's it.
no, I know,
Yeah,
but this seems like it's some
Wow.
bot.
Wow. Yeah.
World. This is
Yeah.
automated.
But Dre, you're absolutely
responses.
right, Dre. It is bizarre. Yeah. This is an equal opportunity killer, right? It kills Democrats just as much as it kills Republicans. You'd think they'd be concerned about it too. It is
this
bizarre, isn't it?
Never should have
It
been
became so political.
politicized.
Why do you think that happened?
Follow the money.
Yeah. The
Agreed.
politicizing of everything has been about money. That's what this whole podcast is about, by the way, talking about things that should have never been politicized.
Yeah.
Right on. I agree with you two wholeheartedly. Unfortunately, it's not just the embalmers and the funeral directors that are seeing these white fibrous clots. The doctors and nurses are seeing them too, and they don't want to speak out about it. It's really sinister. And it's actually hurt the trust in the medical system, hasn't it? Prior to the pandemic, about 70% of Americans did trust the medical system. But now that's plunged to, actually on this slide here, that was taken July of 2024. It was down to 40%. I bet it's probably down to 30% now.
Yeah.
What do you think of that, doctor? What do you think of the trust in the medical system right now?
Easily. It's actually tanked tremendously. And doctors are aware of it. But most doctors, I mean, the reason they won't speak out is it's fear of their own personal situation financially. They've been browbeat and scared that they're going to lose their livelihood. And unless people actually speak up, this never changes. It only gets worse. Their next step is to censor the internet. So you've got a choice now. You either stand up or, this is a hill you need to die on. So I really call out to all my colleagues to wake up before it's too late.
You set me up perfectly, doctor. That's my next 4 or 5 slides. I caught a lucky break in March of last year of 2024. A OBGYN named Dr. Dan McDyer, who's been seeing what he describes in his own words as carnage in pregnant women, premenopausal women, postmenopausal women that have all kinds of bleeding issues, clotting issues, miscarriages, stillbirths, you name tumors he's found ever since the COVID vaccines came out. He said it's just been, like I said, in his words, carnage. He's from Jacksonville, Florida. Dan introduced me to this gentleman here, Dr. Mohana Basharat, also in Jacksonville. And he's a cardiologist and endovascular specialist that works in a cath lab. For your viewers, Dre, that don't know what a cath lab is, I'm sure the doctor does. It's a lab where these doctors use flexible catheters that either suck a clot out, scrape it out, or lasso it and pull it out of living people. And Dr. Bashir admitted to me that he's been removing these same white fibrous clots out of living people for the last 4 years in his cath lab. He actually sent me in one of his emails these photos here. On the right, you see a white fibrous clot. It's still covered in blood when it first comes out, but after that gets washed off, you see that kind of pinkish cord running down through the middle? That'll become a white fibrous clot. And over on the left side of the screen, you see an angiogram of what it looked like. This was a DVT, a deep vein thrombosis in a gentleman's leg. You see what it looked like in the angiogram when the clot was still in the gentleman. And then in the middle, you see that kind of vertical black flow. That is the blood flow that has now been restored after the clot was removed. So this was a successful procedure. Bashir went in, got the deep vein thrombosis completely out, and this gentleman had complete restoration to that blood vessel in terms of blood flow. So that was a good one.
Yeah.
Here's another one. This is a clot that was taken out of the iliac artery down in the pelvis region. Again, you can see white fibrous material after that gets washed off. The light pinkish colors will turn a white color. This next one here is, you probably recognize it, doctor. It's a pulmonary embolism, a saddle PE. And these can become very dangerous. They're up in the lung area, and the doctors have to be very, very careful about how they remove these without killing the patient. And up in the upper left-hand corner again, you can see the lighter colored fibrous material that will turn white when that gets washed off.
So these are nothing like regular
all
clots.
over the body.
No.
These are nothing like regular clots that occur
Regular
that
clots,
cause aneurysms and heart attacks. These are completely
right,
different because of the substance that they are
correct,
made of,
Dre.
which is in the vaccine, or is it
Yes.
also
Prior
in
to
COVID?
COVID as well.
We think the COVID virus can do it as well because, as you know, there's a spike protein on the surface of the virus. And the spike protein is what's causing havoc in the body. It's actually binding with our natural blood clotting protein called fibrinogen. Unfortunately, the phospholipid nanoparticles that deliver the mRNA from the vaccine also get involved. And it's causing instead of our fibrinogen, which is in a liquid form in our plasma, to become what's typically called fibrin. And I'll show a photo of this later on, and you'll see a picture of what it's supposed to look like and what it looks like now after it's combining instead with the spike protein from either the virus or the vaccine and the phospholipid nanoparticle. So that's coming up in a little while.
Is this one? This is a heart.
Doctor,
artery?
you
So
are
this
absolutely
goes to
right.
both ventricles. Is that why it's so
It's
like
a
that?
saddle pulmonary.
What does that mean?
No, it's a lung. It goes to both
pulmonary.
lobes of the lungs. Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Pulmonary, exactly. Yeah, but doctor, you're absolutely right when you mentioned earlier about the fear. At the end of that month, March of last year, I got this email from Dr. Bashir. Tom, I was instructed to immediately terminate all communications. Sorry for the inconvenience. Somebody got to him, didn't they, at the hospital?
Yeah, you
His
bet.
administrative staff. They said, hey, stop talking about this.
Yeah. Again,
We're going to go after your license. We're going to pull your board certification. Right. And Bashir's in a bad way because he's in his mid-40s and he's probably still paying off medical school, and he's got 3 young children. So he's horrendous. I've actually asked Senator Ron Johnson. I've met Ron in a couple of meetings in Washington, D.C. And I've asked Senator Johnson if it would be possible to subpoena Bashir and Dr. McDyer and about 4 of the embalmers I know, these presidents of these associations who all say they're seeing the clots, to come forward and speak in front of Congress about the clots, but to do it under whistleblower protection. And I have not heard anything back from them, but I've put that out there as a possibility.
Pressure.
But even that, whistleblower protection is not all it's cracked up to be, because they could still find other ways to blackball you and go after your profession.
Oh yeah,
it's unfortunate.
Afraid.
Oh yeah,
it really is.
I'm afraid. Aren't you afraid? We're all afraid.
Here's another one of my. Yeah.
Oh, I like Philip. Yeah.
I'm not afraid.
No.
I'm retired, so they can't come after my paycheck.
This is my first time bringing him on here. This hasn't aired yet, but once it does, I mean, people already hate me. So here we go.
Bring it on.
We love you, Dre. But here's another hero I have. This is Dr. Philip McMillan.
Great guy.
He runs a YouTube channel in the UK called Vegan Health. And he found his own doctor in the United States, cath lab worker, who's been working in the same cath lab for 20 years. He says he's been removing anywhere between 3 to 10 of these white fibrous clots out of his patients every week in his one cath lab alone. And unlike the embalmers, these doctors do have access to the COVID vaccination records of all their patients. So they can tell you how many shots they took, when they took their shots, which brand they took. And he says that whenever he finds the white fibrous clots, that person's been jabbed with anywhere between 1 to 8 jabs. And the more jabs they've taken, the worse the clotting seems to be.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, he went dark on Dr. McMillan as well. Somebody got to him and shut him up.
Yep.
Wow.
Oops. He went dark too.
Not McMillan.
Okay.
Yeah.
He did. Yeah. His whistleblower went dark too. Yeah. So based on those 2 partial whistleblowers, what I tried to do, Dre, is I tried to run a cath lab worker blood clot survey, similar to the one I did for the embalmers. But this time I said, I'll add some questions about the vaccines on there. Because like I said, unlike the embalmers, these doctors do have access to the COVID vaccination records of all their patients. So I sent that in a SurveyMonkey survey out to the societies for vascular surgery in the United States, Canada, UK, and Australia, and New Zealand. I also sent it directly to 120 vascular surgeons across the United States. Guess how many responses I got to that survey? Can you take a guess?
0.
0.
Figured.
I believe it.
0.
Yes, I
The
believe it.
doctors don't want to talk about it at all. Yeah.
Mind
So what I did is, with the help of Dr. John Campbell, I don't know if you watch him or not. He runs a YouTube
Yes.
channel in the UK.
Love him.
He's an older gentleman.
Yes.
And also Clayton Morris and his wife Natalie at Redacted.
Love
Yes.
them.
They
Love 'em.
displayed a QR code for me, and I ran I do too. I ran a 2024 People's Blood Clot Survey. And here's what happened. In just 2 weeks, I got over 1,400 responses from people all around the world about their blood clotting experience. So the patients are happy to tell you about their blood clotting experience, even though the doctors are staying silent.
Wow.
If you notice on this slide here, one of the questions we asked in that survey was, what years, mark all apply, did you have your blood clotting issue? Look at 2020, gang. The year that we had COVID but no vaccines yet.
Yeah.
Only 79 had their blood clotting issue that year. But then look how the bars explode starting in 2021 after the rollout of the COVID vaccines.
Insane.
I don't know what that's telling you. It's telling me which one's the culprit. Uncle.
I mean,
Well, we need a randomized
So,
control trial.
Like
to-
the
yeah.
Here's the sad thing. I've turned these surveys in for the last 3 years to the NIH, CDC, and FDA. All the
Yeah,
results of my surveys, all my tables and stuff.
Yep.
Crickets. I've never heard back from them once.
Never will.
Isn't
not
that a
even
shame?
Kennedy.
Yeah, they don't even want to acknowledge. No. I have communicated with them a couple times. They're aware of it. I actually called Jay Bhattacharya a few months ago. It was a Saturday night. I didn't want to bother Jay for too long because he was on his weekend, but I wanted to make sure he knew about the fact that I had briefed the Tennessee embalmers about the white fibrous clots. And he said, yeah, I know about the clots, Tom, because he had communicated with Dr. Ryan Cole. And Ryan was one of the very first people. He's a pathologist in Idaho. Right. And Ryan was one of the very first persons that Richard Hirschman sent samples of the clots to when he started finding the clots. So our 3-letter agencies, RFK Jr., Jay Bhattacharya, Dr. Macri, all of them, they're all aware of this particular problem. They know it exists, but we don't see a lot of action on it, unfortunately.
No. Yeah.
But in this same survey I did with this People's Blood Clot Survey, we had a comment section at the end, and we allowed people to talk about their particular blood clotting experience. Here's one from a surgical nurse inside the hospital. Listen to this one. She says, surgical nurse seeing a huge increase in clots. We're doing more amputations than I've seen in my whole career. I'm definitely seeing the clots you're describing. When I say it's probably due to the COVID shot, everyone ignores me and there's silence in the operating room. I also hear the surgeons saying, I've never seen this before. Also, during heart surgeries, the surgeons are having a difficult time suturing as the tissues are just falling apart. Once again, the surgeons are saying, I've never seen anything like this before. A lot of patients are dying. All right, I'll read one more to you here from that. Get a load of this one, doctor. I was feeling fine. Had pain left side below shoulder blade. Started sweating and feeling weak. Called the ambulance. ECG did not show heart attack. Rushed to emergency. ECG did not show heart attack. Third different emergency. Doctor did an ECG and an ultrasound. They were all perplexed. A cardiologist was called. I went to a heart institute. Arriving there, I went into cardiac arrest. Was out 2 minutes, 3 sets of compressions and 4 defibrillator shocks used. They went in through an artery at the wrist. They removed fibrous clot. They did not want to tell me, but a nurse whispered to me, it's the vaccine. We have so many. Follow-up appointment with the cardiologist. I asked the question directly. The doctor looked down and said, "I cannot talk about it at the risk of losing my job." What do you think of that?
It's the most disgusting thing I've ever seen,
How would
and it's everywhere. And I'm aware of it, and I've heard many stories about the same situation. Yeah, something has to change, folks. This is you've hit critical point here. It's not getting any better. Wow.
No, I think that was part of their thing. Maybe they thought it was going to go away. As we get further and further away from most people taking their last jabs way back in 2021, I think they may have said, well, okay, maybe the phenomenon will go away. That's not what the embalmers are seeing, though. Every year I've done the survey, they're seeing that in an average between 20 to 30% of the corpses, these white fibrous clots, as well as this other phenomenon called microclotting, as well, which the embalmers describe as what they call coffee grounds or dirty blood and the drainage coming off the corpse. And that can be just as dangerous, because the microclotting occurs at the capillary level. Your very small blood vessels can block the exchange of oxygen at the lungs. Then they carry that oxygen to all the major organs of your body, including your brain, your eyes. That's why a lot of people might be suffering from brain fog right now or vision problems. They may have microclotting going on inside their head.
And you don't pick it up from standard imaging.
Here's the really sad part. No, that is correct. The microclotting, you don't pick up from standard imaging. In fact, they're having a hard time even picking up the white fibrous clots because a lot of times they take on the shape of the blood vessel itself and become like a cast to that part of the blood vessel. So it becomes difficult sometimes to see them even in angiograms or CT scans. So, but it's not just the doctors and the embalmers. It's also a lot of our media folks don't want to talk about this. Yeah. I understand ABC, NBC, CBS, even CNN, maybe even Fox not wanting to talk about this. All those major stations, they're sponsored by Big Pharma, right? They have a lot of commercials by Big Pharma on those channels. But even some of our major podcasters on the right don't want to talk about this. And you see here, I actually, in September of 2024, I traveled to Hershey, Pennsylvania to meet Tucker Carlson in person when he was doing one of his lecture tours on the road. And I actually handed him that vial of the white fibrous clots. I gave another vial to his producer, Samantha, and information on how to contact me. And I actually chit-chatted with Samantha for about 15 or 20 minutes, but they have not had me on their show yet to talk about this most spectacular side effect of the vaccines, right? There's nothing like these clots, Yeah. And you think they would want to talk about it on their show because, like I said, the embalmers are seeing these things in, 20, 25% of their corpses. It makes you think, well, what percentage of the living are walking around right now with these things forming inside them? Eventually causing a stroke or heart attack, causing them to die suddenly. And they don't have to just take my word for it. Like I said, they could contact Mr. Woody Wilson, the president of the Ohio Embalmers Association, Mr. Chris Calvey, the president of the Pennsylvania Funeral Directors Association, the Mr. Kevin Swire, president of the Manitoba, Canada Funeral Service Association, Mr. Taylor Moore, who I mentioned earlier, president of the Tennessee Funeral Directors Association, Dr. Bashert, who we just talked about, the endovascular specialist and cardiologist from Jacksonville, or Dan McDyer. They would all tell them, about the white fibrous clots. But there's other stars. I've actually been rejected by Joe Rogan's folks, Glenn Beck, Megyn Kelly. Very bizarre. Megyn herself has been injured by the vaccine. She has an autoimmune disease caused by the COVID vaccine. Why don't these people want to have me on to talk about this most spectacular of all the side effects? It's really weird.
It's bizarre.
Jimmy Dore will probably have you.
Jimmy will have you.
Jimmy Dore.
Yeah. So what? Yeah. I've been on Jimmy. I've done Jimmy's show.
Oh yeah.
I've actually also did Cheryl Atkinson's Full Measure TV show. Yep. Right. I've been on Del Bittry's The High Wire with Richard Hirschman. We did an episode on there. So we've been picked up by some fairly big. In fact, I'm keeping my fingers crossed right now. I was put in contact with Russell Brand's people just the other day. So I'm hoping that Russell will put me on his podcast. He's got quite a few viewers.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
So, So what are we going to do in the future? Are we going to submit to the tyranny, or are we going to stand up next time and say, no, I'm not wearing your darn mask. I'm not taking your stupid shot, Because here's what can happen when people do. This is On the left here, you see what a natural fibrinogen looks like when it turns into that white solid called fibrin. Whenever you get a cut on your arm, then you get a clot forming so you don't bleed out to death. And at the microscopic level, that's what it looks like. It looks like this fibrin looks like smooth spaghetti cooked noodles, and they form kind of a net, and they collect your red blood cells and your platelets and form a clot at the site of the wound. And then when that wound's healed, we have another enzyme in our body called plasmin, and plasmin comes along and attaches to that clot and breaks it down. Then you're good to go again. But look on the right of the screen, gang. See what this is what it looks like when your fibrinogen comes in contact with the spike protein, either from the COVID virus or from the COVID vaccine. It becomes this all misfolded, twisted mess, what's called an amyloid protein, amyloid, which is just a fancy term for a misshaped, misfolded protein. And it gets all these nasty nodules on it. And then it becomes almost impossible for our enzyme plasmin to attach to it and break it down. So then it tends to persist and grow into these nasty white fibrous clots. So what Richard Hirschman did.
Holy shit! I hope we didn't lose everything. They're watching us right now. The big surveillance machine.
Unbelievable. Thought the feds were going to be at the door.
Yeah. Okay, that looks clear now.
That's good.
Hi, Tom. Sorry.
No problem. Did we finish up? Where did you lose me?
Right
we
at
the fibrin.
The fibrin clot.
Okay, do you want to go back to that, or you just want to? I didn't have much more in the presentation other than that. Did you see the picture of the fibrin?
Yes.
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 You saw the two pictures side by side. Did you see the next one of the clot by itself?
No.
Okay. It's not. So basically, what happened after that is the embalmer Richard Hirschman sent a sample of one of the embalmer's clots he had pulled out of a corpse to a neuroscientist in Japan, a Dr. Kevin McCarran. And Kevin, well, I could go back in the presentation if you want me to for just a second, because it might be good for the audience to see what it looked like. Let's do share screen.
Yeah, I mean, talking about it and seeing it are really two different fucking things, which is why I'm sure you were handing a vial of it over there to Tucker, who, by the way, I think eventually he'll have you on.
I hope so.
I think he will. I think that they got to play certain things safe right now. I know that's so crazy sounding, but.
So you saw that one, right? That picture.
Yeah.
This is the next. So what happened is embalmer Richard Hirschman sent about 12 samples of clots, white fibrous clots out of corpses to a neuroscientist in Japan named Dr. Kevin McCarran. And Kevin's well-versed in what's called amyloid material, this amyloid, which is just a fancy term for a misshaped or misfolded protein. Kevin's been studying, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, amyloid that shows up in the brain, right? Creutzfeldt-Jakob. So what he did is he took a look under a high-powered scanning electron microscope at a magnification of 5,000 at one of Hirschman's clot, a 5 micrometer slice, a thin slice of that clot. And this is what he saw. Does that look more like the nice smooth spaghetti noodles that it's supposed to, the regular fibrin looks like, or is it more of that twisted, misfolded mess with the nasty nodules on it, which is what happens when spike protein comes in contact with our fibrinogen and converts it into these bizarre polymers instead, right?
Yep.
It's the latter. So then what it does then, at the eyeball level, this is what it turns into, these nasty white fibrous clots. It starts off at the microscopic level as microclots, then they aggregate and they form these white fibrous clots. So remember the case of Justin Bieber and his wife, Haley?
Yep.
Justin got in 2022, he got a palsy on the side of his face, Guillain-Barré syndrome, and his wife, Haley, had a mini stroke. Justin was 28 at the time. Haley was only 25. Since when do 28 and 25-year-olds that are in great shape have mini strokes and palsies?
These things happen.
Yeah, we know what probably happened. They probably went and got their vaccine at the same time, probably a bad batch, right? And that's when they developed their nasty side effects. But as you know, they didn't say anything about it. They didn't come out and say the vaccines damaged me. Neither did Jamie Foxx. We suspect what happened to Bob Saget, Remember he fell in a hotel room
Mhm.
and died hitting his head on something? Probably collapsed, we talked about Damar Hamlin earlier. Gal Gadot, Wonder Woman, I think had a
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
Big
and
one too.
so, but none of them want to talk about it. There was one person though that did stand up to the tyranny,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Novak Djokovic. I love
Yes.
him.
Yeah.
He came right out and said, "I'm not taking this shot," and it really cost him, right? I mean, he was at the tip top of his career. He had to sit out for about a year and a half. He missed an Australian Open and a U.S. Open. He probably could have won. So, but he had the guts to say no. I actually went to a tournament, the very first one that he had played in a singles match since being banned for a year and a half from the U.S. I wore this shirt saying "Pure Shot by a Pure Blood," and I also had him sign this shirt at the bottom that says Novak Djokovic, and I spelled Novak and Novak, right? Novax. Novak Djokovic is his own man.
Love
And
it.
he signed down there by the O.
Oh, that's great.
And yeah, and I
love it.
apologize on behalf of our country. There were thousands of people at that stadium and all the courts surrounding it there. It's a big tune-up match for the U.S. Open. And after he signed that shirt, I apologized to him and told him, thank you for standing up against the COVID vaccine tyranny. But then I went around the entire inside of that stadium, the outside of that stadium, and all through the food court area, holding this shirt up that he had signed. And I just kept saying the same thing over and over again. My sister Jenny was with me. I took her there. And I said, you know what? Novak Djokovic likes this shirt. See, he signed it. They made him sit for 2 years because of this stupid jab. But Novak proved that he'd rather fight for freedom than chase after trophies. And I just kept saying that as I went around for about the next half hour in that complex until I collected about 5 or 6 of their security people who eventually asked me to leave. They said, "Sir, you're bothering the other patrons. We're going to have to ask you to leave." But, I was okay. My mission was done. I'd seen everybody in the whole complex, thousands of people. So, but it was just a shame that nobody else would recognize in what we had done to this man. Kicking him out of our country for a whole year and a half just for not taking the jab.
Totally. Wow.
So,
Got a question for you, Tom.
Yeah.
With all of the embalmers that have come forward, how many pathologists have you had examine these clots? And
we've
were
had,
willing to do it?
like I said, I mentioned Dr. Ryan Cole looked at the clots earlier from Idaho. Hirschman has sent samples of these clots to scientists all over the world. We're working right now with a team of scientists led by Mr. Greg Harrison in Sydney, Australia. And he actually he's in touch with a few universities in Australia and in Europe. And samples of the clots have been sent there as well. They have done a whole battery of tests on these clots, doctor. They've done the first thing they did is what's called ICP-MS analysis. It's inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometry testing. And that tells you what elements are in the clots. And they confirmed the work that Mike Adams had done, the health ranger, early on. Hirschman had sent him some clots. And they confirmed basically that the white fibrous clots contain very little magnesium, potassium, or iron, which is in high amounts of normal blood. Iron's what gives blood its red color, right?
Right.
Conversely, they found very high amounts of phosphorus, sulfur, and sometimes tin as well, which is kind of interesting.
Yes.
So that's
Tin?
led them to a theory of phosphorylation, basically. Like I said, that the spike protein is getting phosphorylated, and also the phospholipid nanoparticle that carries the mRNA vaccine into the cell. At the moment it opens up to release its payload, the mRNA inside, it's exposing the phosphorus heads. And those phosphorus heads have a great affinity for our natural blood clotting protein fibrinogen and binds with it. So that's what's happening. The phospholipid nanoparticles and the spike protein are binding with our natural fibrinogen. So, and so they've done some other testing too. They've done thioflavin T testing and what's called Congo red staining to confirm the R-indeed amyloid material with misfolded protein.
Yeah.
That's it, and that's been corroborated by Dr. Risa Pretorius out of South Africa. She's done testing on smaller versions of the clots and microclots, and it confirmed using thioflavin T staining they're also amyloid as well. They're misfolded proteins. So they've also done what's called Raman spectroscopy. This has also confirmed it. And one of the things that's really serious right now is Dr. McCarran, that neuroscientist in Japan. He has access to a equipment called RT Quick, which stands for real-time quaking-induced conversion test. And what this test does, it tests for the presence of prions or prions, which are misfolded proteins. These are bad, right? Because they're misfolded, and they actually can make healthy proteins around the misfold as well. So we're still trying to tackle the question, are these white fibrous clots and the microclotting blood surrounding them, are they contagious, infectious?
Transmissible. Yes.
Think about the ramifications of this. You know, blood has been draining off embalmers' tables for the last 5 years down into the open sewers, right? Doctors in operating rooms may have inadvertently infected themselves, the nursing staff or the operating room, with, infectious prions, right?
Yeah.
It's the ramifications. And as you know, people have been donating blood. COVID vaccinated people have been donating blood to the American Red Cross for the last 5 years. We could have a tainted blood supply if this thing is indeed infectious, contagious.
Absolutely.
So, we may have, and the FDA and the CDC should have been on this 5 years ago. When we first alerted them, there was a problem, right? But they haven't touched it. They haven't acknowledged the problem. And this is the result, right? So even if they do acknowledge it now, we're down the road 5 years into maybe what might be a disaster, unfolding.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, I think that because people who are going to watch this, I don't want to capture the other conservatives that already know a lot of this stuff. I want my liberal friends to be watching. I want people who don't know, people who thought that I lost my mind, when I changed my entire way of living. I mean, I don't really even act anymore because of this. I think the people are going to feel hopeless. I think that's why a lot of media people won't even tackle it, because they're also finding the same clotting in the unvaccinated, which is also, a whole other rabbit hole as far as the actual COVID pandemic or plandemic, whatever the fuck we want to call it. Excuse my French.
It's okay, Dre. I'm mad too.
They're really mad.
I got Major Tom in the house. I don't want to be as crazy as I normally am.
Italians coming out.
Oh,
Hey.
You're right though, Dre, about you're right about the.
I just think that people are going to be feeling super hopeless when they hear about this, especially all of my friends are vaccinated. But I don't know. I mean, you can talk about her, Dr. Anna Maria Mihalcea. I don't know if you know about.
Are you familiar with her?
I am, but I have not really gone in. What we've done is looked at the clots from a organic chemistry perspective. Like I said, it's a plus minus charge with the fibrinogen, and your. We haven't looked at. They have not. McCarran has not seen anything in the terms of nanotechnology. Using the microscope.
That's where the rift is. I'm trying to see, why is one camp saying this? You got La Quinta Columba, and they're saying they find this stuff. And
I wonder if that stuff is what encapsulates it, if that's what's holding it together. Okay, so she's talking about nanotech, and you guys don't want to marry that yet, and I understand. But the one part about it that she has mentioned, because she is a doctor who's been studying it forever, and she was studying it before it was being pulled out of bodies, because I've been following her super early on. He sent me something on her once, and then I joined her Substack, and then I would send stuff back to him and say, whoa, this is out of control. Like, I almost don't think I should watch this anymore because it's so fucking out there. But she was seeing everything assembling inside the blood in the dark field microscopy when she was analyzing just the blood of the unvaccinated versus the blood of the vaccinated, and how everything was assembling and causing these sort of rubbery clots. But she does have some antidote, sort of, not antidote, but she does have some solutions for people who, I mean, I don't want people to not listen because they're even more afraid than they were before they got vaccinated. So they went ahead, they got the vaccine. Now it's like, la, 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 la.
They have to have some level of hope. What can we do?
There is some hope. There is some hope.
And there are some,
We got a study recently came out that they actually looked in vitro, in a petri dish. They had microclots, and they were able to dissolve, I believe 84% of the microclots dissolved using nanokinase.
Nanokinase.
Yeah. So,
That's what we use a lot.
Dr. Peter McCullough's, I usually recommend that his regimen of nanokinase, bromelain, curcumin.
Curcumin.
People have also said that quercetin and NAC work pretty well as well.
Yes.
Those 5, and the good news is they're all natural supplements. You don't need a prescription for them. You can actually buy them over the counter. You can buy. McCullough has he's affiliated with the wellness company, but you can actually go on Amazon and buy these products yourself.
It's easy to do.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And they're showing some good promise, like I said, the nanokinase. So I'm like you, I want to give people hope.
It has to be sourced well. Yes. That's one of the things.
That's what he always says.
I said there's a big difference if it says NAC on the label and one company versus another, how they source it, raw materials, contamination.
Because everything is contaminated now.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of contamination.
Like that's why McCullough recommends that you go to McCullough's Wellness Company, because they say that they properly source the material.
They source, and that is really important. But yeah, those are the things that I found very effective.
But not for the big clots. For the
big clots.
Here's what we think is happening there, Dre. We think that the nanokinase does a good job against the microclots, but once they've aggregated into these large white fibrous clots, they're just so tough you cannot break them down. The doctors, like Dr. Bashir that I talked to, they'll try TPA, tissue plasminogen activator.
Yeah,
doesn't do a thing. It does great against traditional grape jelly clots or white or chicken fat clots. Doesn't do a thing against these white fibers.
Yeah, they're not normal clots.
So then they have to go with catheters to remove them. Yeah.
The only thing you can do that I can think of is you have to take them out.
Yeah.
Because what about that vitamin C and the high dose vitamin C and the EDT?
EDTA, that's more for chelating metals out. So that's more of a metal. And that's the other problem you have with geoengineering. You're now mixing that soup in there with this, and you just have so much inflammation in the body.
I know Dr. Pierre Corey has mentioned things like DMSO or chlorine dioxide. Also has been, so people are they're working with these different things right now, trying to find the best regimen for people to, because I'm like you, Dre, we want to give people hope that they may, that may have the problems with the vaccine to get rid of the microclotting they may have going on inside them. So
absolutely. Yeah. Well, we thank you for being such a patriot and having an amazing level of, what would you just say? Just super brave.
You're still a warrior.
You're just a warrior, man. It's incredible to see, and not enough people have that bravery.
Well, I did it. I did it for some selfish reasons too. I actually have family members who've taken the COVID-19 vaccine, and I want to know, are they in danger or not? Right? I've got a daughter, for example. She's 21 years old. She was going to college at the time. She didn't want to go for a religious exemption, so she took the jabs. And now I'm worried about whether my daughter is going to be able to have children someday.
Yeah.
So and I'm not sure you guys have got loved ones, family members, friends, same situation, right? You're worried about them.
Of course.
Yeah. I have to ask everybody this. Do you think that anybody who, is doing all this constant data, gathering it all, do you think that there's a possibility that some of them were placebos and some of them were not? Because I know you can do the Find My Badge.
It is interesting because a couple of years ago, Viveka Manichi and Max Schmeling did a study out of Denmark, and they took a look at Pfizer vials, right? And they found 3 main types, right? They found what they called the blue bad batches.
Yes.
And there were green medium batches with just a few side effects associated with them. And then they also had a series of yellow batches, which almost looked placebo-like. They had almost no severe adverse events associated with them. Now, most of the bad batches that went out very early. They were some of the earliest batches that went out by Pfizer, and they were responsible probably for about 70% of the severe adverse events. One of the things I always thought was kind of interesting is, do you remember when they first got the vaccines, they required very cold storage temperatures, like minus 40 below zero. But then a few months in, they lifted that requirement, and they were no longer. I think maybe they saw that things were going bad with the vaccine. It was causing a lot of severe adverse events, so they lifted that requirement because they wanted the mRNA to go inert, to not. So actually, in that case, if you got a dud, that was a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. I always think that's why they pulled J&J off, because it wasn't toxic enough. But you say it was still toxic.
Oh no, yeah.
It was toxic.
Yeah.
It was,
Yeah,
because
it
remember,
was.
they brought out the J&J shot about a month after the Moderna and Pfizer shots, but then they stopped it. They did a pause for a couple weeks in I think it was April of 2021 of the J&J shot because of blood clotting issues. But then they brought it right back the next month, and they let it go on and stay on for about a year before they finally then pulled it and said, if you're going to get a booster, you need to get Pfizer or Moderna. We're not giving you J&J anymore.
Mix and match. Anything works.
You know, I
Oh,
never
man.
understood what that whole story was.
I mean,
Because
there was no science. It was just
the J&J didn't have mRNA in it. That
so yeah. So no, the end result is the same, which is to create your body into a factory for spike protein.
And
Okay,
you
so my
guys are
question
not.
for you two is,
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
what if they try to run it the same thing next time? What if they come up with another pandemic and they want people to mask up and take vaccines again? What do you think is going to be the uptake, the response by the American people?
You know, it wouldn't work right now, but society has a short memory span, so they tend to forget things. And so they're giving it enough time. I know they plan on doing it again. They've even said it. So if you give it enough time and then you make it scary enough, all you have to do is light up the fear brand again. I still think they're going to have a really tough time pulling it off. I think they need something else.
Well, I think they dump it out of airplanes. And
Wow.
that's my, and I know you were in the, you were Air Force, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but that's why I started the podcast, was to draw attention to the geoengineering, because very few people will talk about it. But I really feel as though a lot of this came right out of the planes, and those polymers and all of that sort of, they're poisoning us.
Well, they got caught doing it with Operation Sea Spray.
Dre, I'm afraid too, because you're right, because then that takes away informed consent. You don't even have the choice about whether you're going to get the shot or not, right?
Yeah.
You get it without
No.
knowing it.
And it's in everything. It's in our food. It's in our animals. It's in it. And it is. And I know that we haven't talked about the nanotech, and we don't have to talk about that at all. But we're filled with metals.
Yeah,
I mean,
you're already filled with metals. And also they don't need to do that, because all they need is a self-disseminating, self-amplifying vaccine.
Right. Which they've already approved, I think, in Japan, right? I think they've got a self-amplifying. Yeah.
But you remember Robert Redfield, former CDC director, literally said in a recent interview that's what he thinks COVID was all about, which I thought, wow.
That it itself was a self-spreading
with
vaccine.
its self-spreading vaccine, which did I hear that right? So I believe that's what he said. I'm going to go back and listen to it. And somebody sent me that. I'm like, wow, that's a
That's
big
a CDC. Wait.
Yeah.
Oh yes,
Redfield.
that was. I think Karen Kingston had it on her.
Yeah.
On her show, and he said, and now Hatfill, the stuff he's saying about it, now that he's been forced to resign from NIH, what role did he have? Kennedy hired him, and now he's been forced to resign, and he's on a media tear. Basically, I think he's speaking for Kennedy, because the people in power can't actually speak. So they have their groundsmen speaking. And that's basically what we're seeing, I think, right now. It's the most complicated time of all times, because everyone's being surveilled, everyone's being watched. So there must be some sort of coding and circuitous, this guy is going to go talk about this. Everybody else is doing their bidding for them to inform the public. But, we're about to be censored more than we ever have, I think, in the upcoming year. With AI coming in to basically give us the real reset, which I think probably happens every 300 years now, to wipe out history.
Yes.
But I believe that people, they sense what's up. People can sense it, right?
They do.
Now, I was going to ask the two of you, do you have people in your own lives, family, friends that you believe are vaccine injured?
So let me think. Yes. I mean, I'm sure you do.
A lot of my friends are vaccinated. I feel like everyone around me that had the placebo. I believe that everyone I know is going to be okay. I believe that wholeheartedly. I do see a shift and a change in the way some of them think, but not fully 100%. It's the ones that have had more It's the ones that believed wholeheartedly that it would help them are the ones that think differently now. The ones that knew they had to just do it to comply are more, but yeah, I don't think they are. But what I am dealing with, Major Tom, is the other reason why we started doing the podcast is because of the vaccine injured in the military.
Mm.
So I've only had 2 on so far. I'm going to hand over at some point in the new year to React 19, so that everybody can tell their story, because only a certain amount of people get to go in these movies with, like Del Bigtree or all of the, Mickey Willis, like everybody who's making these films. So we do want to give people a chance to tell their story because they've been ignored. They've been sidelined, made to feel invisible, even when they were putting together groups of other vax injured where they could find solace together. They eliminated those groups off the internet. So a lot of those people will get a voice here and be able to talk for a little while. So far, I had a little girl. Her name is, I call her a little girl, but she's an adult woman. Lindy Ayers Mattingly. And the other one is, he goes by Drew Outstanding. I don't even know what his real name is. He's Drew Outstanding. But he was in a coma and with Guillain-Barré, and she basically can barely walk. She was jumping out of planes in Afghanistan into the ocean, jumping out of helicopters, whatever. And now she can barely walk 20 feet. So I've kind of been holding her hand through a lot of I brought her on here for the first time and she couldn't even get up to do the interview, but she found her way to the computer with her husband and did the interview. And it was her first time speaking out, but she wants to because she doesn't know what else to do. Like, what do we do in a situation like this where your whole life is just about this now? It's about being carried from one side of a room to another, when these were like the most active people and they were heroes and warriors that our country was, they just left them behind and told them that they'd get a dishonorable discharge if they didn't comply. Would cut all their benefits. I mean, I'm sure there were,
I saw, Dre, God bless you for giving those people a voice because they have been forgotten and it's terrible. I'm going on Tom Renz's show tomorrow. If you want me to, I can put you in touch with Tom and maybe Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long. They were involved in uncovering all the nastiness that was going on in the DOD's DMED database, right? Where they were showing miscarriages, neurological damage up by, 500, 800% increases after these troops. And remember, these are like 20 and 30-year-old guys and gals in the military, healthy as anything, taking these shots. And then all of a sudden you have this explosion of all these, things, like I said, like neurological damage, miscarriages in the women, things, heart attacks, strokes, it's grounded a lot of pilots. It's just been horrible what's happened to our military. So if you'd like me to, I can ask Tom maybe and Teresa Long if they'd like to come on your show, on your podcast and talk to you about that. Because
yes, please, all of them. Because and the reason why I think it was this kid Lindy that got me to that place, because she's a young girl. And all I saw was my daughter. That's it. And when I said no and did not comply, I knew that if it was, I knew it was going to be one of us. I knew it would either be me, my boyfriend, or my 2 children, that there would be an injury. I just felt it in my fucking heart that one of us would be injured. And the fact that my house was in foreclosure over it, like we lost everything very, very quickly for not complying. So I didn't care about that. All I kept thinking about were the nurses and the doctors and everybody who was being kicked out of their profession for not complying, the ones that knew. And I was like, what can a nurse, like I can sell this house and try to get my money back, but and live my life. But these nurses and doctors and frontline workers couldn't do anything. They're just going to have to figure it out. And now you're injured on top of it. The ones that did take it are injured and they were complying. They did what the right thing was to do. And now they get nothing in return. I mean, they told this kid that she needed to see a psychiatrist. This was in her head. And it was told to half of these kids in the military that it was psychological. While you're hooked up to a machine for 2 weeks in a coma, that's psychological. I mean, come on. So I think
that's
that
the worst thing. Gaslighting the patient is just,
yes.
you probably saw that too, didn't you, doctor?
It's the biggest, that's the most atrocious thing, is the gaslighting. It was so blatant that it almost turned into just a COVID clown world. Things got sillier and sillier.
It does feel like that. It is fucking
It
silly.
is. And so the only way to wake people up actually was with humor, because their limbic brain activates and they can't use critical thinking. So it was comedians that came in and actually did things.
Yeah.
They were
activists.
and they were activists. And that sort of shook open a little door so that they could actually start to think and go, maybe I should consider that this is not a good thing. And it did work. I saw a lot of people wake up, and, I helped wake up a lot of people. So I think, like I said, when you ask that question, could they do this again effectively? Not right now, no. But if you wait long enough, they like playing the long game. So,
let's hope that people take our attitude more, and that, like I say, they think about it and they say, well, wait a minute. I think I can get another job, but I can only have one body. I can't get another body, right? So
that's what I tell
100%.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Your job is not worth your life. So
yeah.
Well,
you are a hero. And yeah, you are. You are. Anybody who's willing to speak out against this, knowing how dangerous it has become for a lot of people. I think we're all aware. I mean, there are a lot of people who are gone that started talking about this. I hate to say that. I mean, that's a scary thing to say, but
you stepped up even when you were faced with adversity, and you did the right thing, and that takes bravery. So we all owe you a big amount of gratitude.
Yeah.
And for your service to the country as well.
You're still in the military. You're defending.
Yeah, it's a new military.
You are defending we the people for real. You are the real.
I feel like I'm doing more now than I ever did for the 20 years I was in uniform. This is a more important task. Amen.
Yes.
Well, thank you both for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.